Welcome to the Treasures of Mishnayot. We are in Mishnayot of Berachot, in Perek Chet, Mishna Bet, that's chapter 8, Mishna 2. We're going to see today's Mishnah where there is a machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. What do you do first? Do you wash your hands and then you pour water into the wine? Or do you pour the water into the wine and then wash your hands? It's a machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. The Mishnah begins, Beit Shammai omrim, Beit Shammai say, Notlin liyadayim, you first wash your hands, ve'achar kach mozgin et hakos, and afterwards you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water. Now you have to understand why mozgin, because back then when they used to make their wine, it used to be strong wine. It was not diluted yet. Today, what you and I buy in the stores, all the wine is already diluted. Back then, it was not diluted. So therefore, comes Beit Shammai and he tells you, you're first going to wash your hands, and then you're going to dilute the water with the wine. Ubeit Hillel omrim, and Beit Hillel say, Mosgin et hakos. No, you're first going to dilute the cup of wine with water, and afterwards you're going to go ahead and wash your hands. This is the whole machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. As you guys can see, this is the whole Mishnah. It's very short, but it's unclear. Doesn't make sense. You don't know what is the machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. What is going on over here? Today we're going to learn new information, a lot of new information. Some information might be difficult, but Bezrat Hashem, we're going to try to do our best in explaining it and simplifying it as much as possible. So the Kahati begins. Mitzvah hachamim, it is the mitzvah from the rabbis, Shehi adam rochetz yadav lefnei achilat pat, that a person should wash his hands before eating bread. Shemevarachim alecha hamotzi, that you bless on it hamotzi lech min haaretz. Now you might ask yourself a question. You might say, Rabbi, it doesn't make sense. Why is the Kahati being redundant? Why is he telling me that the mitzvah of the Chachamim is that one has to wash his hands before eating the bread? And then he tells me what bread? The bread that you bless Amoti on it. Of course you bless Amoti on bread. What other bracha can I bless on bread? So Rabotai, we need to remember that not every single bread that you eat deserves the blessing of Hamotzi Lech Min Haaretz. Not every single bread. Some bread is Borei Minei Mizanot. For example, you go to a bagel store and you want to buy yourself a raisin bagel, or you want to buy yourself a egg challah, or you go to these pizzeria stores today. If you ever see how they do the dough, what do? We, a lot of times, when you make your challah, you have to make sure that when you're mixing everything inside, you want to put water, a lot of water, so it doesn't taste sweet. But a lot of people, what do? They put apple juice. When you put apple juice into dough, if it tastes sweet, the blessing changes from hamotzi to borei minei mizanot. Once the blessing changes to borei minei mizanot, you can't wash on that bread. If I can't wash, I can't even say hamotzi. So that's why a lot of people have this problem on Shabbat. I was in somebody's house for Shabbat, and it was very good because my son caught on to it. I didn't pay attention to it. He looked at the challah automatically. He realized that this is an egg challah. He said, Abba, we cannot say hamotzi on this. I said, well, how do you know? Just by looking at it? He said, yes. So I asked the person, the balabait, asked him, can you bring me the bag? And I saw it, Rabotai, it said egg challah. And the interesting part is, how do you know 100% that this is borei minei mizanot? So if you take a piece of any bread and you put it into your mouth, if you taste sweetness, even a little bit, for Sephardim, automatically, Rabotai, it is the blessing of borei minei mizanot. So Rabotai, so we saw over there that what the ingredients were, it was not water, it was more apple juice that they put inside. So automatically we are not able to go ahead and say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz on that challah. Nevertheless, Rabotai, we need to remember that whenever it comes to eating bread, we also have to know what type of dough we are consuming. Not every single bread deserves the blessing of a motzi lechem min haaretz. And that's what the Kahat is telling you here. That there is a mitzvah from the rabbis to wash your hands for the bread meal. But which bread? Bread that you're going to bless on it, a motzi lechem min haaretz, and not bread that you're going to bless on it, borei minei mezonot. Now we're moving on to the next topic. This washing of the hands that we do, what is the blessing that you say on it? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al nitilat yadayim. Do you know the definition for the word nitilat? Nitilat does not mean washing the hands. Nitilat does not mean, it's not defined as washing. It's defined as taking. What's the proof? When you take the arba meaning, when you take the four species, the lulav, etrog, haravot, and chadasim, when you take them together on Sukkot, what blessing do you say? Asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al nitilat lulav. What do you mean al nitilat lulav? If nitilat means washing, so how in the world am I saying it on the lulav? Because the word nitilat does not mean washing. The word nitilat means taking. So if the word nitilat means taking, why in the world am I using it for the washing of the hands? If we look into the Mishnah said, Ben Shammai Omrim, Ben Shammai say, Notlin liyadayim. What? You wash your hands? Notlin, it means to wash your hands. Notlin does not mean to wash your hands. Notlin means to take. It doesn't mean to wash. What am I going to say? To take your hands? What am I blessing, Rabotai? We're blessing the blessing of Al Yadayim so many years. What does the blessing even mean? So the Kahat is going to explain this to us now. He says, Rechitza zo, this washing that we do for the bread, Rechitza zo, this washing, Nikre'el b'lashon of Mishna, it is called in the language of the Mishnah, Nitilat Yadayim. It's called Nitilat Yadayim. But Rabotai, watch this. Koloimar, meaning to say, when you say the word nitilat right over here, it means likichat. Likichat means to take. So now you have to ask yourself a question. So what are you taking? So he explains it. Maim, you're taking water, bikli, in a utensil, lirchot hayadayim. That's how you have to learn this Mishnah. When it says over here, you're washing your hands, when you say the blessing of Asher kidishanu b'mitzvot v'tzivanu al nitilat yadayim, you know what's supposed to go through your mind? Nitilat is not the washing. Nitilat is the taking of the utensil with the water to wash your hands. That's what it means, nitilat yadayim. You're taking the cup of water to wash your hands. So nitilat is taking the cup of water to wash liyadayim, your hands. You see how it works, Rabotai? That's what he says over here. Rechitza zo, this washing, nikred b'lashon Mishnah, is called in the language of the Mishnah, nitilat yadayim. Koloimer, meaning to say nitilat, likichat. Mayim b'kli l'rchot yadayim. You're taking the water in the utensil to wash your hands. That's what you're doing, Rabotai. That's why the blessing for the washing of the hands is not the rechitzat yadayim, the washing of the hands. It's nitilat yadayim, the taking of the water in the utensil for the washing of the hands. Now, Rabotai, we understand what means the blessing of nitilat yadayim. In which opinion did he bring this down in? The Tosfot Yom Tov and Malach Shlomo, they both hold like that. However, he says, V'yesh shovrim, and there are those that hold. Do you know why it's called nitilat yadayim? I'll tell you outside and I'll read it to you inside. Nitila comes from the word natla. In Aramit, natla was a utensil that they used to use to wash their hands. So that's why we say nitilat yadayim. Just to resemble what they used to do in Aramit. So that's what he says over here. V'yesh shovrim, and there are those that hold that this language of nitilat yadayim, nigzera, it was decreed, mean natla, it was decreed from the word natla. What is natla? Ha'inu, which means to say, shem hakli be'aramit, it's a utensil. It is the name of a utensil in Aramit. שמשתמשים בו לרחיצה הידיים, that they used to use it for the washing of the hands. So we see, Rabotai, another way we can understand why do we say nitilat yadayim, because in Aramit, the name of the utensil is called natla, and they used to use it to wash their hands. That's what we say nitilat yadayim. And biyavanit, and in Greek, it's called antalion. The utensil that they wash their hands with is called antalion. So really the nitila, like we saw, according to all opinions, is really going on the utensil itself. Whether according to the Tosfot Yom Tov and the Melech Shlomo, what do they say? You're saying the nitila, you're saying that you're taking the water in the cup to wash your hands. Good. It's going under the kli. So to hear, in Aramit, what do you call this utensil? Natla. Good. Nitil yadayim. In Yavanit, what do you call this utensil? Antalion. Good. The root word is nitila. So we see, Rabotai, why we say nitilat yadayim. Now we are moving on to the next point. Now, Rabotai, buckle your seatbelts because we're about to enter into an area, I don't know how many people are even aware of what we are about to learn today. Now we're going to try to see, why do we wash our hands? If you ask yourself the question, why do we have to wash our hands for the bread? Why? Hygiene reasons? Okay, fine. So let me wash without a cup. Why I have to wash with a cup? Why do we have to wash our hands for the bread? So now we're going to see this, Rabotai, and if you can, focus, take a pen and a paper, and you can go ahead and follow me as we go along, just to make it easier for yourselves. We're going to speak about different levels of tumah. I'll show it to you. I actually wrote it all out over here. But Rabotai, I strongly suggest when you're learning concepts that you are unfamiliar with, always write it down so it can get engraved in your brain. So let's go back over here. Tama mitzvah, the reason for the mitzvah of the washing of the hands, lifi shayadayim askiniot hen, because our hands are constantly busy, v'negaot hen, and they touch, mibli masim, without paying attention, b'mekomot mizuhamim, in dirty places. How many of us are aware where our hands have been? If I ask you now, what did your hands do the last hour? Are you going to remember? No. So therefore the rabbis of blessed memory, they were afraid that since people are not aware of what their hands are doing, and they could come and touch dirty places. You could walk into the bathroom, for example. You can put on your shoes. You can scratch your head under your kippah. You can go ahead and you can scratch underneath your t-shirt. Any place which is covered is going to disqualify your hands. So since you're not aware if your hands are clean or not, so what do the rabbis of blessed memory do? Hilkach, therefore, gazru chachamim astam yadayim. The rabbis of blessed memory, they made a decree on hands in general. You don't have to touch anything for it to become tummy. They went and they said, Shehen shiniyot letuma. They made our hands second degree impurity. Now, Rabotai, we are about to dive into deep waters. This is where I recommend you take a pen and a paper and try to go down with me one by one, level by level, in order to be able to remember this. What we're about to learn right now is not easy, but we're going to try to do our best to try to simplify it. So now, to understand what does this mean that our hands are shniyot letuma, and what does it have to do with the washing of the hands for the bread meal, comes the Katz, he says, Libiura inyan, to explain this matter, how our hands become sheni letuma, yesh lo osiv, we need to add. And now what the Katz is going to do, he's going to go ahead and he's going to break down the levels of tuma, how we get to a second level of tuma. From there only can we understand why in the world we wash our hands for the bread meal. Now, Rabotai, I know that this is complicated. So what I did was, I wrote it out over here. So now we're going to see that there are different levels in impurity. From seeing each level, we're going to come to understand how do we get to the second level of impurity, which is on our hands. And then we're going to understand what is the connection it has to do with the washing of the hands for the bread meal. Be'ezrat Hashem, Rabotai, as we go along, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to say Avi Avot Atuma. I'll explain the concept, but I want you guys to remember what means Avi Avot Atuma. It will make the learning more understandable. So Avi Avot Atuma is the father of fathers of impurity, which is the highest level of impurity. Who can have this level of Avi Avot Atuma? Only a dead person. That's it. A dead person has the highest level of impurity possible, which is called in Hebrew Avi Avot Atuma. Now we're moving on down one level, which is called Avatuma. How do you get Avatuma, or how does a person become Avatuma? There are 6 ways. First 2 ways is anyone who becomes Tameh because of the dead person through touching, whether it's a person or utensil, they are called Avatuma. In English, it's the father of impurities. So you have 2 from the 6. How do you become Avatuma? If a person touched a dead person, he becomes an Avatuma. Or a utensil touched a dead person, it becomes an Avatuma. The next 4 cases, a dead rodent, Nevela, Zav, Mitzora, are also all called Avatuma, the father of impurities. So we see over here right now, you have 6 things that are Avatuma. The first one is if a person touches a dead person, which is Avi Avot Atuma, he becomes Avatuma. If a utensil touches a dead person, it becomes Avatuma. A dead rodent, the Kahatzi says sheretz. What's a sheretz? I just put it as a broad concept, but a sheretz is a rat, or a lizard, or a mouse. Now, if they are dead, not when they're alive, if they are dead, they have the level of Avatuma on them. Nivela, what's a nivela? A dead kosher carcass. You know, sometimes you go to the slaughterhouse, and if you ever see how they slaughter the animal, let's say a sheep or a cow, when they start checking the knife, if the knife has any blemish on it, even the most minute blemish, it disqualifies the slaughter, and the animal is called nivela. There is a difference between nivela and treifa. Treifa is where the slaughter was kosher, the knife had no problem with it, but the animal had a hole in its lung, chas v'shalom, or in the stomach, or anywhere else. That's treifa. Treifa cannot make you impure. It doesn't have any impurity status on it. Nevela has the impurity of Avatuma on it. So we have a sheretz and nevela. Again, nevela could also mean where an animal was struck by a car and he died without a proper slaughter. That's also nevela. Again, any one of these things have Avatuma level on them. Then you have a Zav. What's a Zav, Rabotai? A Zav is a man who saw abnormal emission. Then you have a Metzora, a leper. All of these 4 cases, they all fall under the category of Avatuma. So like we said, we had 6 altogether. A person touches a dead person. A utensil touches a dead person. These 2 are Avatuma. A sheretz, nevela, zav, and metzora, all of these have the level of Avatuma impurity on them. Now, one who touched an Avatuma, now we're going down another level. So we saw Avi Avot Atuma, then we saw Avatuma, now we're going one level down, which is going to be Rishon L'Tuma. One who touched an Avatuma, anybody who touches the Avatuma, meaning one of the 6 cases that we enumerated above, a person who touched a dead person, a utensil that touched a dead person, a sheretz, nevela, metzora, or a zav, if you went ahead and one of these things were touched, becomes first degree impurity, which is called Rishon L'Tuma. So therefore, anybody who touches Avatuma, they become Rishon L'Tuma, first degree impurity. They have that level on them. Now, first degree impurity can only make food or drinks impure. If food touch first degree impurity, it becomes second degree impurity, which is called Sheni Lituma. Rabotai, we are getting to what we want to see. So we said over here that you have Rishon Lituma, which is the first degree impurity. Rabotai, remember the terminologies. So you have over here first degree impurity, which is Rishon Lituma. It can only metame, it can only impurify food or drinks. So therefore he says, if food touch first degree impurity, which is Rishon Lituma, it becomes second degree impurity, which is called Sheni Lituma. So now watch this. We said that Sheni Lituma can only metame, can only impurify Truma and Kodesh. So therefore comes the Kahati and he's going to tell us, if the Truma touches the second degree impurity, which is the Sheni Lituma, it becomes a third degree impurity, which is called Shlishi Lituma. So now we're moving another level down. However, Rabotai, third degree impurity can make a fourth degree impurity, which is called the Revi'i Lituma, by Kochim only. So let's do this, Rabotai, let's do this. You have Avi Avot Tuma, you have Avatuma, you have Rishon Lituma, you have Sheni Lituma. Sheni Lituma can only make Truma and Kodesh Tameh. It cannot make Chulin Tameh. Chulin is mundane bread. Truma is bread which belongs to the Kohen, which is holy. Kodesh, which is consecrated bread, also Rabotai, is holy. So if you have Truma which touches Sheni Lituma, it becomes Shlishi. Or if you have Kodesh which touches Sheni Lituma, it becomes Shlishi. But Rabotai, here we go. But once the Truma has the level of Shlishi Lituma, it can only impurify bread which is Kadosh, which is Kodesh, which is consecrated bread, not Chulin and not Truma. Okay, Rabotai, so watch this. Third degree impurity can make a fourth degree impurity, which is called the Revi'i Lituma by Kochim only. So it comes out over here, Rabotai, if you have Truma, which is Shlishi Lituma, the next thing that it could make Tameh, that's only bread which is Kodesh, which is consecrated bread, it can make it fourth level Tuma. But if you have bread which is Truma on a third level impurity, and you have another bread which is holy, regular bread Truma, and it's not Tameh, now if these two breads come and they touch each other, nothing happens to the Truma bread. Because Truma's Tuma can only pass to Kodesh. Okay, Rabotai, so we have over like this. Avi Avot Tuma, Avatuma, Rishon Lituma, Sheni Lituma, Shlishi Lituma, Revi'i Lituma. This is how it works, Rabotai. But more importantly, we have to understand that when you have Avi Avot Tuma, which is the dead person, if a person went ahead and he touched that, he becomes Avatuma. Let's say that person who's an Avatuma touched food. What does it become, Rabotai? Rishon Lituma. Now, since it's Rishon Lituma, what happens if another food touched Rishon Lituma? What level does it get? Sheni Lituma. Here we go. What happens if you have Chulin bread, regular bread, mundane bread, not Truma and not Kodesh? Touches Sheni Lituma, what happens to it? Nothing. It doesn't become Tameh. What happens if Truma or Kodesh touched Sheni Lituma, the food? What happens? It becomes Shlishi Lituma. Now the Truma cannot make another Truma Tameh. That Tameh impurity level stops by them. But if the Shlishi Lituma by the Truma touches bread which is Kodesh, it's able to make it fourth level impurity. Rabotai, I hope you guys are getting this. Let's run this one more time. Let's run through this one more time because it's very important. Avi Avot Tuma, which is the father of fathers of impurity, the highest level of impurity, which is the dead person. Anyone who becomes Tameh because of the dead person, through touching, whether it's a person or utensil, they are called Avatuma, the father of impurities. A dead rodent, which is the sheretz, nevela, zav, metorah, are also all called Avatuma, the father of impurities. One who touched an Avatuma becomes first degree impurity, which is called Rishon Lituma. First degree impurity can only make food or drinks impure. A food touched first degree impurity, it becomes second degree impurity, which is called Sheni Lituma. Here we go. second degree impurity, which is called sheni lituma, could only impurify truma and kodesh. If truma touches, Rabotai, the second degree impurity, it becomes a third degree impurity, which is called shlishi lituma. Third degree impurity can make a fourth degree impurity, which is called rivi'i lituma by kochim only. Here we go, Rabotai. Now we can understand why the rabbis made us wash our hands for bread. If they made a decree that our hands are second degree impurity, sheni lituma, therefore, what did we say before? That sheni lituma can disqualify Rabotai truma. Correct? If sheni lituma is able to disqualify the truma, I have a problem. So therefore, what's going to end up happening? If you have bread where the wheat is from the truma portion, it's going to disqualify it. And that's what we're saying over here. If they made a decree that our hands are second degree impurity, it disqualifies the truma. Meaning, if a person touched truma where he's second level impurity and did not wash his hands initially, the truma is disqualified and you need to burn it. Rabotai, we're starting to understand why we're needing to wash our hands for the bread. We still didn't get there. This is for the Kohanim, by the way. To accustom the ones that eat truma, the Kohanim, they obligated everyone else to wash. Rabotai, listen to this carefully. What's going to happen, Rabotai? If, imagine like this, imagine the Israelim and the Leviim, they're not washing their hands for bread. They don't have to wash. Why do we have to wash our hands for bread? Where does it say in the Torah you have to wash your hands for bread? You don't have to wash. But what, Rabotai? Imagine the Levi and the Israel, they're not washing their hands for bread. And the Kohen has to wash his hands for bread, correct? You know what's going to happen over time? The Kohanim, they're going to forget this halacha that they need to wash their hands for bread. Now what's going to end up happening? If they don't wash their hands for bread and they're going to touch the truma, it's going to disqualify it. Now you can't disqualify truma unnecessarily and you have to burn it. You can't do anything with it. You can't even feed it to your dog. So that's what the rabbis of blessed memory say. In order for the Kohanim, Rabotai, not to forget their halachot of the washing of the hands for their bread, which is truma, you know what the Chachamim said? We're going to obligate also the Levi and the Yisrael to wash their hands for the bread, even though they're not obligated. We're making them wash in order for the Kohanim not to forget the halacha. Can you imagine that, Rabotai? Here, to accustom the ones that eat truma, they obligated everyone else to wash, even for chulin and maaser, Rabotai. Let me just go back for a second. Second degree impurity, sheni lituma, could only impurify truma and kodesh. If you have bread which comes from the produce of truma, or if you have bread which came from the produce of kodesh, sheni lituma can only purify them, not chulin, not maser. Because remember, you also have maser rishon, which is given to the Levi. That maser rishon also, when you give them wheat, what they make bread with it. So comes the halacha, the chachamim come and they say, listen, okay, good, I'm happy that you tell me read that sheni lituma can only make truma and kodesh tameh, but not chulin and maser. But you know what's going to end up happening? If we're not going to obligate everyone to wash, the Kohanim are going to forget the law. Now, we're all stuck. Now they're going to start disqualifying truma. We don't want that. So what did the rabbis of blessed memory say? Even though sheni lituma does not impurify chulin and maser, nevertheless, the Chacham of blessed memory said they made a decree that is going to disqualify. That's why they made our hands sheni lituma. They made it the second degree impurity. So now we have to be careful not to touch even chulin or maser. So we have to wash our hands. That's what Rabotai we're saying over here. To accustom the ones that eat truma, they're obligated everyone else to wash, even for chulin and maser. That's why we wash our hands for bread today, besides the reason of hygiene. Rabotai, can you imagine? The Chacham had to go a full circle just to protect the Kohanim. Now you understand, Rabotai, why we wash our hands for the bread meal. It's because to remind the Kohanim that they have to wash their hands for Truma and that they should not disqualify it. Okay. Now, Rabotai. So we see that these are all the levels of Tuma. Now we're going to go back over here and we're going to see all this in the Kahati. Because remember, what happened over here? We said over here, since people's hands are constantly busy and they are always on the move and people are not aware what they do with their hands, what happened? Hilkach, therefore, Gazru Chachamim Astam Yadayim. The rabbis of blessed memory, they made a decree on hands. Again, you didn't touch nothing. You didn't do nothing. You didn't touch the dead person. You didn't touch Rishon Lituma. Nothing. In general, your hands are, they're always just doing other things. Nevertheless, the rabbis were afraid. We don't know where your hands were. So therefore, the rabbis made a decree on the hands. Shehen Shniyot Litum. Watch this, Rabotai. Wow, we're going to start understanding this beautiful piece. That they are second degree of impurity. Sheni Latuma. That's what the Kahati says, Libiura Inyan, to explain this matter, Yesh Lo Hosif. We need to add. We have to add in order to be able to understand what's going on over here. Yesh Dargot Bituma. There are levels when it comes to Tuma. Tuma Tamet, the impurity of a dead person, Nikreet, it's called, Avi Avot HaTuma. V'chol ha'mitame'eh machmat hamet. Anybody who becomes tameh because of a dead person, kigon, for example, al yidei nigi'ah, by touching, ben adam or ben kelim, whether you are a person or whether it's utensils that are touching the dead person, nikra, they are called avatuma. So again, avi avot hatuma, avatuma. Moving down the level. V'chen, and so too, sheretz met, if you have a dead sheretz, like a dead rat, a dead lizard, a dead mouse, nevela, like we explained, a kosher animal where it died without the proper slaughter, zav, a person who saw abnormal emission, umetorah, a leper, all of them are avot hatumahem. They are av hatuma. Hanogei be'avatuma. Anybody who's going to touch an avatuma, naaseh rishon lituma, he becomes rishon lituma. Ve'en rishon lituma mitame el ochlin umashkim. Rishon lituma can only make tame food and liquids. Ve'im naga oichel berishon lituma, if a food touched something that was rishon lituma, harei naaseh sheni lituma. It becomes sheni lituma. ואין שאין לטומאה מטמא חולין אלא תרומה וקודש. שאין לטומאה cannot make חולין טמא. It cannot. It can only make תרומה וקודש טמא. שאם תרומה נגעה בשני לטומאה, if the תרומה touch שני לטומאה, הרי היא נעשית שלישי לטומאה. It becomes שלישי לטומאה. ומכל שכן קודשים, for sure קודשים. ושלישי לטומאה עושה רביעי לטומאה בקודש בלבד. שלישי לטומאה can only make a רביעי לטומאה by קודש alone. Here we go, רבותיי. מכאן, שסתם ידיים שגזרו לנו שניות לטומאה, from here that when we spoke about our hands, which are constantly busy, שגזרו עליהם that the חכמים made a decree on them, להיות שניות לטומאה, they made them to be second degree of impurity, like we mentioned above, poselet et truma, it disqualifies the truma. Rabotai, can you imagine? Let's say my hands right now, I didn't eat bread, I don't wash for bread, nothing. So I don't know where my hands were throughout the whole day. Again, before I sit down to learn, of course I wash my hands, but I'm just trying to give you an example. Now let's say if I have bread which is made from truma wheat, and I touched it, I disqualified it. Rabotai. Because since my hands are sheni lituma is able to make shlish lituma by truma and kodesh. So good, I just disqualified it. And that's what he's telling us over here. Posalet truma, the sheni lituma disqualifies the truma. Koloimar, here we go. Meaning to say, She'im adam naga betruma, if a person touched truma, velo nata yadav techila, and he didn't wash his hands first, ha'truma nifselet v'tiuna serefa. The truma becomes disqualified, and you need, or better yet, you are required to burn it. Rabotai, do you see what just happened over here? You see how severe this is. Sheni lituma, shlish lituma. So once this truma becomes disqualified, you got to burn it. Umishum serech truma. Now, Rabotai, what is serech truma? Serech literally means to attach. Since truma is attached to this halakha, therefore, what did the rabbis of blessed memory do? In order to accustom the ones that eat truma, which are the kohanim, in order for them to wash their hands, you know what the chachamim did? Hitzrichu chachamim nitilat yadayim gam la'achilat chulin u'maser. The rabbis required the washing of the hands also for eating chulin and ma'aser. Which means to say that if you have wheat products which are not truma and they're not kodesh, they're chulin, they belong to you, they're mundane, you have to wash your hands. Why are you washing your hands? Because of the kohanim. We want them to be accustomed and not forget the halakha. And also when it comes to Maser Rishon, which belongs to a Levi, say he had wheat products which were given to him. Over there also we're going to tell you, even though a Levi should not have to wash, we're going to tell you he has to wash. Right? You need to wash your hands. Lechulin, for chulin, mundane bread. Ulemaaser, also for maasarot bread. Uletruma, and also truma bread. So you see clearly it says, Umevur sham begemara, and it's explained over there in the Gemara. Lechulin, when it says that you need to wash your hands for chulin, hainu dafka la'achilat pat. That's specifically when it comes to eating bread. Aval la'achilat perot. However, when it comes to eating fruit, ein tzarich nitilat yadam. You do not require the washing of the hands. Yeter al ken amru. More than this, the Chachamim of blessed memory said, Kol anotel yadayim leperot. Anybody who's going to wash his hands for fruits, harei ze migasei haruch. It's from the haughty ones. Vehu adin lechol minei dagan, and the same halach is going to apply to all type of wheat products. Shemevarechim alahem borei minei mezonot, that you bless on them borei minei mezonot. She'enam tzerichim nitzilat yadayim, they do not require the washing of the hands for the bread meal. Baram, however, kol davar shitibulu b'mashkim, anything which is dipped into a liquid, kegon perot, for example, fruits, shetatafun b'mayim, if you wash fruits, or yarek, or vegetables, shetovlin b'chometz, where you dip it into vinegar, or tapuch b'dvash v'chadumeh, or apple into honey, and anything similar to that, tzarich nitilat yadayim techil, you first need to wash your hands. Hatamu, the reason is because the rabbis, they made a decree on the liquids, even if they're going to touch sheni lituma, they become rishon lituma. Kemo sheshaninu in Masechet Para, kol aposelet truma, anything that's able to disqualify the truma, which is sheni lituma, metame mashkim le'techila, it's able to impurify the liquids to make it first level of impurity. Hainu rishon lituma, which means to say rishon lituma. Lefichach, therefore, im lo yitol yadav, if you're not going to wash your hands, harei hamashkim yitmeu machmat hayadayim, the liquids are going to become tamid because of your hands. V'hiyu rishon lituma, and they're going to become first level of impurity. V'itmeu et apri, and they're going to impurify the fruit. Or et ayerek v'chadumeh, or the vegetable and anything similar to that. So just to get a better understanding of this, let me just show you over here. There are 7 liquids that you're not allowed to either dip your food into them, or even to put these liquids on the food, unless you wash your hands like you do for the bread meal without a bracha of al nitzlat yadayim. Which are what? Wine. Wine, a lot of times they make wine, and a lot of times they take this wine and they make vinegar from it. So therefore, if you have a vegetable and you want to dip it into vinegar, or you want to pour the vinegar, which is made from wine, on a vegetable, you can't consume that food when it's wet. Either you're going to dry the food, or you're going to wash your hands like you do for the bread meal without saying the blessing of Al Nitzilat Yadayim. Same halakha is going to apply to blood. If Chas v'Shalom lo aleinu, the doctor said a person has to consume blood for his health, and he can't just drink it like that, he wants to dip a cookie or something in it, same halakha is going to apply. Same thing with olive oil, milk, dew, water, and honey. So then, Rabbotay, in all of these cases, we got to be very careful. If a person wants to eat a chocolate chip cookie and he wants to dip it into milk, you can't do that. You got to wash your hands. If you wake up one day and you go outside to your backyard and you have apples or grapes that dew fell on them in the morning, you can't just consume it the way you want it. Either you dry it or you wash your hands, like we explained. Water, if you wash an apple or grapes, a lot of times you see people, when they're in somebody's house, they wash the grapes and they give it to you. How are you consuming it? If you don't dry the grape, you must wash your hands. What about honey? Like dipping an apple into the honey. Again, in all these scenarios, you must wash your hands like you do for the bread meal without saying the blessing of Al Nitzilat. So what was the Kahati telling us was like this, Rabbotay? We have to understand. So let's say that this is an apple. And I wash this apple. Now you have liquid on it, water. And I didn't wash my hands. What's going to end up happening? Comes the Kahati and he says like this. Your hands are sheni lituma. It touches the liquid on the apple, which becomes rishon lituma, which in return makes the apple sheni lituma. Comes out that you're consuming an apple which is tameh sheni lituma. So that's what, Rabbotay, we have to be very careful to wash our hands when we are consuming food from one of these 7 liquids. And furthermore, the rabbis, they made a decree on the liquids. Even though the liquids have the status of rishon lituma, and we mentioned that something which is rishon lituma can only make food and liquids tameh alone. Nevertheless, Gazru Chachamim, the rabbis made a decree, Shehiyu hamashkim mat'am'in kli, that the liquids, they should impurify a utensil. Why? Gezerah mishu mashkim zav v'zava. It's a decree because of the liquids that come from a zav and a zava. Zav is a person who saw an abnormal emission. A zava is a woman who saw in 3 consecutive days blood. Shehem avot atuma, because they have the level of an avatuma. Kigon zovo verokov v'chadume. For example, Rabbotay, you have, let's say, a zav. He spit. Now, Rabbotay, if that touches you, you become rishon lituma. But how do you know which liquid is on the floor? So the rabbi said that liquids, they're going to go ahead and they're going to be able to mitama utensils, because we don't know if this liquid is from a zav or from a zava. That's what he says, Kigon zavo v'rokov v'chadume. For example, right, if you had the zav, or he spit, or he urinated, and anything similar to that. Mikan banu l'machloket Beis Shammai ben Hillel. And from here we come to the machloket, to the argument between Beis Shammai and Ben Hillel. B'mishnatenu, in our Mishnah, ihim notlin yadayim lifnei mizigat hakos. Do we wash our hands before the diluting of the cup of wine with water, or la'acharecha, or afterwards? Kifish in Ber Halam b'Mishnah, like it's going to be explained later in the Mishnah. Wow, Rabbotay, now we are about to begin the Mishnah. Okay. Beis Shammai omrim, Beis Shammai say, notlin liyadayim, notlin maim liyadayim. You're going to take the water for your hands. Koloimar, meaning to say, rochatzim et hayadayim lesuda. You're going to wash your hands for the bread meal. Ve'achar kach mozgin et hakos. And afterwards, you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water. So comes the Ka'aj and he explains what is the machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Lefi Rashi, according to the understanding of Rashi, Midubar Khan, we're speaking about over here, Bikalal, in the rule, Beyayin Abal Lefnei Hamazon, where wine came before the bread meal, Kimosh Shaninu Lamaila, like it was taught above in Perek Vav Mishnah Hey. If we go over here for a second, we said over here, Berech alayayin shelefnei hamazon, if you blessed on the wine before you had the bread meal, pataret ayayin shalach ramazon, you exempted the wine after the bread meal. So that is their machlok. It is going back basically on that Mishnah. If you have in front of you right now bread and wine, what do you do first? So he says like this, Vesovrim Beit Shammai held, Shetechila initially first, Notlin Yadayim Lesuda, first you're going to wash your hands for the bread meal. Go ahead, wash your hands for the bread meal, have the bread. Ve'achar kach, and afterwards, Mozgin et hakos hayayin, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water. Veshotim, and afterwards you're going to drink. Ubed Hillel Omrim, and Beit Hillel say, Mozgin et hakos techila. No, first you're going to go ahead and you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water. Veshotin oto, and you're going to drink it. Ve'achar kach notlin liyadayim, and afterwards you're going to wash your hands, meaning to say, rochotzim et yadayim lesuda. You're going to go ahead and you're going to wash your hands for the bread meal. So Rabotai, according to Rashi, let's just go to the Mishnah for a second. When you see the machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, according to the opinion of Rashi, they're arguing on a normal case, in a normal situation. It's not Shabbat, it's not Yom Tov. You have an option right now to go ahead and have bread and drink wine. What do you do first? Beit Shammai Omrim, Beit Shammai is going to tell you, Notlin liyadayim. If you have bread in front of you and also wine, you're first going to go ahead and you're going to wash your hands for the bread meal. Eat the bread. Say hamotzi. Eat it. Ve'achar kach mozgin et hakos. And afterwards you're going to go ahead and you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water. Ubed Hillel omrim. And Beit Hillel is going to say just the opposite. Mozgin et hakos. No. First go ahead, dilute the cup of wine with water. Drink it. Ve'achar kach notlin liyadayim. And then you're going to go and you're going to wash your hands for the bread meal and then you're going to eat your bread. So this is the machloket according to Rashi that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel are having. Now, that is the opinion of Rashi. However, if we continue, V'yesh mefarshim. Now we're going to learn a whole different understanding in this Mishnah. V'yesh mefarshim, and there are those that want to explain Mishnatenu, that our Mishnah Oseket is dealing because Shel Kiddush is going on a cup of wine where you have to do Kiddush on it B'Shabbatot u'B'Yamim Tovim, on Shabbat and Yom Tov. This is the opinion of the Rif. The Rif wants to learn that this Mishnah is not going on a regular day, you're just having bread or wine. The Rif wants to learn that this whole Mishnah, the Machlokit between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, is going on the Kiddush of Shabbat and Yom Tov. And now they're going to explain their machloket. Vesovrim Beit Shammai, and Beit Shammai held, Shenotel Adam Techila Yada. First you're going to wash your hands for the bread meal, Lesuda, for the meal, Vekodem Shemevarech Hamoti, before you're going to bless Hamoti, Hu Mozeget Akos, you're going to go ahead and you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water, Umikadesh Alav, you're going to go ahead and you're going to do Kiddush on it, Veto'em min hayayin, and then you're going to taste from the wine. Ve'achar kach mevarech hamotzi al hapat, and then you're going to only bless hamotzi on the bread. Ubed Hillel sovrim, and Beit Hillel held shetechila, no, first mikadesh al hayayin, you're going to do kiddush on the wine. Ve'achar kach notel yadav, and afterwards you're going to wash your hands. Ubateya al hapat, and then you're going to go and you're going to break the bread. Umavarech hamotzi, and then you're going to say hamotzi like in the aretz. So Rabotai, when we go back to the Mishnah, according to the Rif, it's a completely different understanding. It's a different ball game. According to the Rif, the machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel is when you're doing Kiddush on Shabbat and Yom Tov, what comes first? Is it the washing of the hands or is it the wine? Beit Shammai is going to tell you, wash your hands say the blessing of Ansel Yadayim, but you can still have bread. So you wash your hands, you do the Kiddush, you drink from the Kiddush, then you go ahead and you say, Hamotzi Lech Min Haaretz. Rabotai, one more time. According to Beis Shammai, you wash your hands first, say the blessing of Al Nitzilat Yadayim. Next step, you're going to go and you're going to do Kiddush on the wine. After you finish doing Kiddush on the wine, you're going to drink from the wine. Next step, now you're going to go and you're going to bless Hamotzi Lech Min Haaretz on the bread. That is the opinion of Beis Shammai. Comes Beit Hillel says, no. First you're going to do Kiddush. Drink from the wine. Then you're going to wash your hands, and only then are you going to bless Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. This is the machloket between Beis Shammai and Beit Hillel in the world of the Rif. Now we want to see Tama Machloket. We want to see the reason for their machloket. What is the reason for the machloket? What's going on over here? Why each one is holding differently? Why is Beis Shammai telling you, you first must wash your hands? And why is Beit Hillel telling you, no, first go ahead and have the cup of wine? Tama machloket mevur beBaraita beGemara. The reason of their machloket is explained in the Baraita in the Gemara. Sheledat Beit Shammai, according to the opinion of Beis Shammai, if you're going to go and you're going to start diluting the cup of wine first, yesh chashash, there is a concern, shema machmat miziga, maybe because of you diluting the cup of wine with water, yishpechu mashkim ala chorei hakos. The liquid is going to spill on the back of the utensil. So can you imagine if this is the cup? So I'm trying to dilute this cup of wine, correct? So when I'm pouring the water into the wine, into this cup, we are afraid that maybe the water is going to go back, is going to come down on the back of the utensil. And when you're going to touch this before washing your hands, Rabotai, listen to this beautiful machloket. The liquid that's over here on the back of the utensil, meaning on the outside of the utensil, they're going to become tameh because of your hands, because our hands are sheni lituma. Right? They're going to become tameh because of your hands. Rabbi Sa is going to go back and it's going to be tameh the cup. It's going to be tameh the cup. Like we explained above, Shamashkim nasim rishonim lituma, that the mashke, that the liquid is able to become first level of tuma, and then they're able amim kli migezer hachachamim, and they're able to make a utensil tameh because of the decree of the rabbis. So what is the problem, Rabotai? Beis Shammai comes and tells you like this: if you're not going to wash your hands now, because what did Beis Shammai say? Beis Shammai said, wash your hands. Then go ahead and pour the wine, right? Pour the water into the wine. If you're not going to do that, you know what's going to end up happening? Watch this, Rabotai. If my hands, the rabbi said that our hands are sheni lituma. If my hand has the din of sheni lituma, I have a problem. When I'm pouring the water, Beis Shammai is afraid maybe the water is going to go on the outside of the utensil. By me touching this mashkim, it becomes rishon lituma. Once that mashkim is rishon lituma, on a rabbinical level, that mashkin is able to make the kli tameh. That's a problem, Rabotai. That's what Beis Shammai doesn't want. Ve'amnam, however, chachamim hekilu b'tuma zo ve'amru. But the rabbis, they were leaning with this tuma and they said, if the outside of a utensil became tameh b'mashkim with a liquid, achorav timi'im, just the outside of the utensil is going to become tameh. It's only this is going to be tameh. Mitam gizer chachamim, because of the reason of the decree of the rabbis, kemosh zechar, like we mentioned. However, he says tocho, the inside of the utensil, ve'aguno, meaning safto, meaning the brim of the utensil, ve'osdo ve'adav, the handles of the utensil, tohorim, they're tahor. The rabbis were lenient. Baram, however, Beis Shammai sovrim, Beis Shammai held asur l'shamez bekos. It is forbidden for one to use a cup where the outside of the utensil became tameh with a liquid. Why is that a problem? It's a decree, maybe the drops of the wine, they're going to splash on the outside of the cup. Now the liquid is going to become tameh because of the outside of the utensil, which is already tameh. And now they're going to make your hands tameh. So Beis Shammai learns, I don't want you using a utensil which is tameh. Bottom line, if you're going to use a utensil which is tameh, it's a very big problem for me. Why? Because should the wine splash over here, now by you touching it, it's going to make your hands tameh. So basically the tuma level transfers. So it comes out that when you're going to eat something, you're going to eat something with tameh hands. So therefore, Beis Shammai says, I don't want you using ever a tameh kli. Or if you don't want me using a tameh kli, now we could understand why Beis Shammai says you first wash your hands. Hilkach, therefore, notlin yadayim techila. We want you to go ahead and we want you to first wash your hands. And afterwards, you're going to go ahead and you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water. So you should not impurify this cup with your hands. Because Rabotai, you have to remember how this whole thing works. If according to Beis Shammai, you're not allowed to use a kli which is tameh, you know what the Beis Shammai is telling me now? Since I'm afraid of that, if your hands are sheni lituma, and now when you're diluting, when you're pouring the water or even the wine into the cup, and if it's going to go over here and your hands are sheni lituma, you're going to touch the liquid, it's going to make it risha lituma. Now the risha lituma is going to make the kli tameh. If it makes the kli tameh, Beis Shammai says you can't use it. So therefore Beis Shammai says, wash your hands first. Wash your hands first because we want everything to be pure. Hilkach, therefore, notlin yadayim techila, wash your hands first. And afterwards you could go ahead and you can fill up the cup with wine. In order for you not to make the outside of the cup tameh. That is what Beis Shammai held. Beis Hillel Sovrim and Beis Hillel held, mutar l'shamesh b'kol she'achorav temeim. No, you're allowed to use it. Why can't I use it? V'lachen, therefore he says, im yitol yadav tichil. According to Beis Hillel, since you are allowed to use a cup which is tameh, he says like this, Rabotai. Therefore, if you're going to wash your hands first, yesh chashash, maybe there's a concern. Shema yadav lo yu niguvot yafeh. Maybe after the washing of the hands, you're not going to dry them completely. You're not going to dry them well. Memeh anitila, from the washing of the hands, from the water of the washing of the hands. V'yitmeu mashkim. Now the mashkim is going to become tameh. Shebiyadav machmat achrei akos. Now the liquid on your hands is going to become tameh because of the outside of the utensil. Because if this is tameh, and now your hands are tahor, but you have liquid on your hands. Same thing, Rabotai. Once this touches this, it makes it risha lituma, automatically makes my hands sheni lituma. That's what he tells you over here. And he's going to go back and he's going to make his hands tameh. It's coming that you're eating with impure hands. We don't want it. Therefore, you're going to go ahead and you're going to pour the wine first. Go ahead, dilute the wine. And afterwards, you're going to go ahead and you're going to wash your hands for the bread meal. In order for you to be able to eat with pure hands. So the machloket between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is, Beis Shammai learns that you are not allowed to use a tameh utensil. So therefore he says wash your hands first, because if you're not going to wash your hands, what's going to end up happening? That if your hands have the level of sheni lituma, now if we're afraid that maybe by the time when you're pouring the wine or the water into the cup, it's going to touch the outside, it's going to splash on the outside. Now if your hands are sheni lituma, it's going to make the liquid risha lituma, which is going to make the utensil tameh. If it makes the utensil tameh, Beis Shammai says asur for you to go ahead and use a tameh utensil. So therefore Beis Shammai says first go ahead and wash your hands, then go ahead pour the wine. So we shouldn't make the utensil tameh. But according to Beis Hillel allows you to use a utensil which is tameh. So Beis Hillel says, what is the purpose of you washing your hands first? He says there is a concern the other way. If you're going to go ahead and you're going to wash your hands, and you didn't dry your hands completely and there's still water left, even though your hands are tahor, but I allow you to use a kli which is impure. So by you now using this kli, what just happened? The tumor transfers onto the liquid. The liquid makes your hands tummy again. Comes out that you're eating food with impure hands. So what is the purpose of washing your hands in the beginning? That's why Beit Hillel says, first pour the wine, then wash your hands for the bread meal. Rabotai, let's just see that one more time according to Beit Hillel. Here. Ubeit Hillel Sovrim. Let's go from here, Rabotai. Let me just do this. Ubeit Hillel Sovrim and Beit Hillel held Mutar lishtamesh because she'achorav tmeim. You are allowed to use a utensil where the outside of the utensil is tameh. V'lachen, and therefore, im yutol yadav techil, if you're going to wash your hands first, yesh chashash, there is a concern. Shema yadav lo yunigivot yafe. Maybe your hands are not going to be dried very well. Meimei hanitila, from the washing of the hands, from the water that you washed your hands with. V'itmeu hamashkim shebeyadav machmat achorei hakos, and the liquid that's on your hand is going to become tameh because of the outside of the utensil which is tameh. V'yichzaru v'itmeu et hayadayim, and it's going to go back and it's going to make your hands tameh. V'nimtza ochel b'yadayim misuvot. It comes out that you are eating with impure hands. Hilkach, therefore, mosgin et hakos techila. First you're going to go ahead and you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water. And afterwards you're going to wash your hands for the bread meal. Why? In order for you to be able to eat with pure hands. And another reason is brought down in the Brit according to the words of Beit Hillel, because because there is a rule that immediately to the washing of the hands, you want to go ahead and you want to start the bread meal. Kolomer, meaning to say, you shouldn't interrupt between the washing of the hands and having the bread meal. But according to Beit Shammai, there's a big interruption. The way we want to learn. So that's where Rabotai comes Beit Hillel. He has another reason why he's telling you, you should first go ahead, pour the wine into the cup, wash your hands, and then start your bread meal because you want them to be as close as possible. But according to the way the Rif wants to learn in the opinion of Beit Shammai, he says, no, first you're going to go ahead and wash your hands, then you're going to do the kiddush of the wine, then you're going to drink the wine, then you're only going to say hamotzi, and then you're going to eat the bread. The washing and the eating of the bread, they're very far apart. There's too much of a separation. The kiddush and the pouring interrupts the washing to eating the bread. That's why Beit Hillel says, I don't want to go even like that. So therefore, Rabotai, we see in today's Mishnah, according to the Rif, Beit Shammai omrim notlin liyadayim. Beit Shammai says you're going to wash your hands for Kiddush of Shabbat or Yom Tov, and you're not going to still eat bread. Afterwards, you're going to go ahead and you're going to pour the wine into the cup, or you're going to dilute the wine with water. And after you did all that, and you said the Kiddush, and you drank from the Kiddush, now you could go ahead and say hamotzi and eat the bread. That is the opinion of Beit Shammai. But like we saw in the second reason of Beit Hillel, you have a problem over here that the washing of the hands is not close to the eating of the bread. Ubeit Hillel omrim, and Beit Hillel say, mosgin et hakos, first you're going to dilute the cup of wine with water, or you're going to pour the wine into the cup, meaning you're first going to do kiddush. And afterwards you're going to wash your hands, and immediately after that you're going to be able to go ahead and say hamotzi lechem na'aretz. Now the washing is close as possible to the eating of the bread. Okay, Rabotai, with this we conclude the Mishnah. We finish Perek Chet Mishnah Bet. Let's just do a small summary from the Mishnah itself. We saw that there is a machlokes between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. The only thing is, who do you learn it like? Do you want to learn it like Rashi, or do you want to learn it like the Rif? Let's learn it like Rashi, and then we're going to learn it like the Rif. Beit Shammai omrim, Beit Shammai say, according to Rashi, it's going on a regular normal meal where you have bread and wine in front of you. Beit Shammai omrim, Beit Shammai says, notlin liyadayim, you first wash your hands and have the bread. And afterwards you're going to go ahead and you're going to pour the wine into the cup. Beit Hillel omrim, no. Beit Hillel say, no, mosgin et hakos. First go ahead, pour the wine into the cup, drink the wine. And afterwards you're going to go ahead and you're going to wash your hands for the bread meal. That's in the world of Rashi. According to the Rif, this Mishnah is going on the Kiddush of Shabbat and Yom Tov. Beit Shammai omrim, Beit Shammai is going to say, notli liyadayim. You're first going to go ahead, you're going to wash your hands on Shabbat or Yom Tov. Say the blessing of Al Nitzilat Yadayim. Ve'achar kach mozgin et hakos. And afterwards you're going to go ahead and you're going to pour the wine into the cup. Meaning to say, you're washing your hands first, saying Al Nitzilat Yadayim. You're not eating bread. Then you're going to go ahead, do the Kiddush on the wine, drink the wine, then only are you going to say Hamotzi on the bread, and then you're going to eat the bread. According to this thinking, we see that the washing of the hands is not next to the eating of the bread. Beit Hillel omrim, and Beit Hillel is going to say, no, mosgin et hakos. First you're going to go and you're going to do the Kiddush on the cup of wine. You're going to pour yourself wine, do the Kiddush on the wine, drink the wine, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to wash your hands for the bread, say Al Nitzilat Yadayim, then you're going to say Hamotzi lech min haaretz, and you're going to eat from the bread. So now the washing is close to the eating of the bread. Okay, Rabotai, this is the Mishnah as a summary. Let's just go over here for a second. Let's just see today's summary in very short, Rabotai. The sages established a rabbinic commandment to wash hands before eating bread, over which the blessing of Mochi is said. This washing is called Nitzilat Yadayim, meaning taking water with a vessel and washing the hands. Why hand washing is required? Hands touch many things without us noticing and are therefore assumed to be ritually impure. The sages decreed that unwashed hands have the status of second degree impurity, like we spoke about, sheni letuma. Such hands can invalidate truma, so the sages required hand washing to prevent this. To keep people accustomed to this practice, they extended the requirement to ordinary food like chulin when eating bread. When washing is required, Rabotai, we spoke about when you shouldn't wash and when you should wash. Washing is required before eating bread. When is it not required? For fruit, snacks, or foods that require the blessing of mizanot like cake or pasta. Washing hands for fruit alone is considered unnecessary and it's also considered to be hoary. The exception is any food dipped in the 7 liquids that we spoke about does require washing because liquids can transfer impurity more easily. We saw the dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Wine before a meal. There is a dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel about whether to wash hands before or after pouring wine. Beit Shammai says, wash your hands first and then pour the wine. Beit Hillel say, no, pour the wine first, drink it, then wash hands and eat the bread. If hands are washed too early, remaining water on the hands might become impure again. A key principle we saw, immediately after washing hands, one should eat, no interruption, which Beit Shammai doesn't have and Beit Hillel has. In any event, Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai L'Olam. Amen ve'amen.